Anyway, good morning, everyone, and thank you all for attending. Just introduction, my name's Simon McNair, and with me I've got Shane Byrne, who's the new UDV manager. Some of you may know Shane already. He's had extensive experience in the dairy industry. This morning is about the 6 nominees for the ADF elections to have a chance to present their credentials to members of the ADF. Of the 6, we're going to give each of them 5 minutes to talk about themselves. Then we'll take questions at the end of everyone's 5-minute presentation. Just a warning that for everyone that this webinar is being recorded. Just been joined. Yeah. And this is about ADF, the ADF director elections. Now, for my panelists, could I ask you all to put yourselves on mute until you hear from me to give your presentation, please. That way we can ensure that the right video is getting through to the people who have signed in for today. And we're ready to go. So first up, we've got John Versteeden. John, if you're there.
Yep. Thanks, Simon.
What for you?
Ready to go? All right. Thank you. Good morning, members of ADF and guests, and obviously a thank you to VFF with Simon and Shane facilitating today to put this on. I think it's certainly needed. I guess I just commence by saying I respectfully request that you consider my nomination for the ADF board, because I believe I have the skills and attributes that are required to make a meaningful contribution to the future of the dairy industry at a national level. I've always endeavoured to be part of the solution rather than the problem, and I'm confident that I can provide a meaningful contribution to the future sustainability and resilience of dairy. In my mind, we need to look further out than just 5 years, as that time span disappears in the blink of an eye. We need to start thinking about the longer term sustainability, how we can better be attuned to what the market requires. We've got consumer trends, we've got plant-based foods. How do we best obtain a win-win outcome in how we operate as individual businesses and as an industry? We've been slow to learn how to adapt to a less regulated environment, and we need to pick up the pace. Deregulation happened 21 years ago, which is nearly a full generation. We must embrace sustainability and deal with the challenges that are coming our way at a fairly rapid pace. Things like climate policy, labour challenges, farm profitability, technology adoption, just to name a few. ADF has led the Australian dairy industry for in excess of 75 years and in various forms, which has created a solid foundation for today's dairy farmers, even though this is tested at times with many events that are beyond our control, such as bushfires and floods, which are happening in New South Wales as we speak, poor seasonal conditions, high input costs and low milk prices at times, which we all understand are part of the challenge and the risk of agriculture and need to be acknowledged and managed as best we can. Notwithstanding these events, there are many issues that are within our control, and I firmly believe that if not for our industry organisations such as ADF, along with the state dairy farming organisations and Dairy Australia, for example, the industry would be in much worse shape. I do believe I understand the challenges that dairy farmers face on a regular basis, but I can also see the opportunities that exist within the industry for both current farmers and the next generation of farmers. And if you choose to elect me to the ADF board, I will endeavour to work hard to provide opportunity for as many dairy farmers to be as successful as they can or want to be. One area I'd like to comment on is the much touted unity word. To me, unity means that we can have our robust discussions and debates, but hopefully with the most up-to-date information at our disposal, and preferably not in the public domain, as this makes us appear unprofessional and fragmented. Most people understand we cannot continue with our divisive and negative commentary on dairy every time an opportunity in the media presents itself. Yes, we can have differences, and yes, we may not agree on some issues, but these sometimes robust debates need to be had inside our industry tent and not in the public domain. We need to embrace the diversity and diverse views, but in an accountable manner. Let's achieve the 80% target where we can't agree on everything, but if we can get to 80%, we're actually going pretty well. Let's have a more united front that showcases our professionalism and highlights the opportunities for success. Let's work towards a more efficient and future-ready way of working together that is fit for purpose and driven by purpose rather than preconceived ideas or needs from the past. We must find a way to work more cohesively so that we have a dairy industry that is trusted and respected both internally and by the whole supply chain, inclusive of our retail customers. I firmly believe that there are significant opportunities in the marketplace if we are brave enough to embrace creative and diverse thinking to seek out these opportunities. One thing I am very mindful of, and that is that this role is a national role, and as such I would operate in the best interests of Australian dairy farmers, not solely Victorian or Gippslanders may be perceived. I'd like to see dairy farmers succeed no matter where they farm in this great country, and I firmly believe that that is possible provided everyone takes responsibility for their part in moving forward into the future. There are successful farmers in every state and region of Australia. We just need to celebrate our successes and not be afraid to talk positively about the value that is created, not only on farm, but right throughout our communities and the wider industry. Positive mindsets go a long way to successful outcomes. At the end of the day, we have far more in common than we have differences, and I would work to those commonalities in order to achieve the best possible outcomes. On a more personal note, my wife and I have had a rollercoaster dairy journey, with originally starting from humble beginnings on wages and no money in 1984 with a young family, which seems like a long time ago. We really didn't have much of a dairy connection, and I think the catch cry at the time was getting thrifty at $2.50, and that was a kilo butterfat, not a kilo milk solids. We were armed with only enthusiasm and a healthy work ethic and not much else. We've been able to build a significant wealth along the way thanks to being engaged with industry organisations and some very good farmers and getting good advice from a credible network, which we have been fortunate enough to maintain. But it hasn't been without interruptions along the way, such as the Black Saturday fires and low prices and poor seasons, etc. Which I would like to say that I've loved the vast majority of our journey in dairy, and I would really like to contribute to a level of resilience and prosperity for our future farmers that they can share in the journey that is very fulfilling both personally and professionally, and generally unable to be matched by too many other industries. I've always been proud to be a dairy farmer and would like the opportunity to have a say in shaping that future for more dairy farmers to have the opportunity to be the best they can be as they strive for a sustainable future. I much prefer the view through the windscreen than the rear vision mirror. I'd like to thank you for your time and respectfully request you consider my nomination as an ADF Director. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Just a reminder, everyone, we will take questions at the end. I know there's one there for you in the Q&A, John. You can either type in a response if you wish to now, or we'll deal with that question at the end. Thank you for that. Colin Thompson, if you could have a chat, please.
Thanks, Simon. And yeah, I'd also like to thank UDV for facilitating this event that I think is important for this board election and for farmers and members to get to know the candidates that are standing for election. By way of introduction, I've had a lifelong involvement in the dairy farming business, and beginning on the south coast of New South Wales. And then in 2000, we relocated our business to the Lachlan Valley, very wet Lachlan Valley at the moment, in Carra in central New South Wales. It's a Carra that we've developed there, a fully housed dairy facility for 320 milking cows plus our young stock. And I've always had a passion for dairy. I've always had a passion to innovate and develop new systems, new technology. And I've always been involved in, I guess, research projects and committees, development committees involved in looking at new technologies and new ways of dairy farming. I became involved in advocacy over the last 6 years, first becoming involved on the committee of New South Wales Farmers Dairy Committee, and I've just entered my 3rd year as chair of that dairy committee. I've also been involved at all levels of ADF, from the PAGs through to National Council, and then the last 12 months on the board. I suppose, particularly in the last 12 months, that experience has given me a very strong understanding and appreciation of the vital role that ADF plays for our industry. We do live in a changing world, and there's many and varied challenges that we're all facing in the industry. And so I think it's more important than ever that we have a peak organisation that's nimble, that has foresight, that is well resourced and has strong leadership. I do have a very high regard for our small but highly skilled team led by David at ADF, and they continue to amaze me as the volume of work they are able to churn out there out of the small office and a small team that they have. It's a very dedicated and committed team that we have. As John mentioned, ADF is almost an 80-year-old institution. It's stood the test of time. It's been there. It's been through many industry events. We do remember the. Is that noise coming through, Simon, or we go okay to continue? So we do tend to remember the headline events that have happened in the past. That maybe Murray Goulburn and the clawback scheme, but ADF was there then, and as a result, we now have the mandatory code. We go back further, we think of deregulation, and ADF was there then and negotiated probably one of the biggest adjustment packages ever for an agricultural industry in Australia. And I think we just need to recognise that ADF is there on a daily basis, working for farms and for the industry to ensure that there's a strong and committed team behind the industry and doing things that probably many farmers don't recognise or even know about, but ADF is there and working for industry. I believe that there are areas that we can improve on, and having through the experiences I've had in the last 12 months. And perhaps one of those things is working with a closer relationship with our stakeholders, and in particular our RDC Dairy Australia, to ensure that we get the best investment from our levy and the results of that. And maybe an example of that would be climate change, and regardless of our views on climate change and the causes of that, I think one thing we can all agree on is that the dairy industry must reduce greenhouse emissions and to meet our regulatory requirements, to meet our consumer and customer requirements. There are steps that we're going to have to take to address that issue. But I think it's an issue that can be done through sustainable farming and other practices that can see benefits rather than I suppose problems for the industry and costs for the industry. But it's an example of where advocacy and research can work together, and I think that's a key to our way forward is working closely with our stakeholders, working together, being united, and working in the best interests of all farmers. I do see opportunities for the industry. I think it's a great industry. I see untapped potential. I see marketing opportunities, growth opportunities for dairy, but we just do need to work together and to be united. I think ADF also needs to probably develop better communications with our members so that members understand what we stand for and what we do. We also feel there's opportunities for ADF to, as I said, work closer with stakeholders and estate farming organisations and with our members. I'd also just like to have the opportunity to pay tribute to our outgoing President, Terry Richardson, and for the commitment and work that he has done for ADF and for the industry, and also to Victoria Taylor, our independent board director, who is retiring from the board. So I would like to submit myself to this election and offer my services, my skills to continue to develop ADF, develop the industry, and to move forward into a stronger and brighter future. Thank you, Simon.
Thanks, Colin. Next we have Daryl Hoey.
Thank you, and welcome everybody for joining in this morning. I have nominated for the board, and I seek your support in standing for the board position. I've been an active member within the ADF now for probably close on 12 years through the previous board and National Council, as well as a long-time policy councillor for the UDV for spanning 10 to 12 years. So I have a long history in advocacy and understanding advocacy and representing farmers. I've also spent a number of years on the Murray Dairy Board as well, so as well as many other industry parts. So I understand many of the issues that farmers face. Lani and I moved to Victoria nearly 30 years ago now. So I have had history in Queensland and both in Northern Victoria and in South Gippsland. In standing for the board, I clearly understand the lines between the board, which is a governance board, and the National Council, which is sets and recommends the policies that come up to the board. So I see both challenges and opportunities for ADF as an organisation. And one of the things I would like to see as a board member is closer oversight and some better governance on some of our key industry issues. As an ADF board, we actually hold a significant stake in Datagene, and I feel that things like Datagene, dairy moving forward, and the DA annual operating plan, is which ADF has oversight of, are areas that we can certainly improve and do better, so that we can actually guide those organisations and have better oversight in getting better outcomes for our farmers. And I think one of the areas that definitely does need addressing is how we communicate with our members. And traditionally, ADF has done its communication through its state bodies, through the state farming organisations, and that is then filtered down through the members. So I think that communication role of working closer with the state farming organisations, which is two-way relationship, and then having our members better service so they have a better idea on what ADF is doing and how we've come to those positions, will be vital in keeping members up to date and building confidence in the roles that what ADF does. I think as an industry, we will always achieve better outcomes when we work together. And that's both from an ADF and the National Council, the state farming organisations, Dairy Australia and other industry bodies, that we will always be more successful and we'll always be able to drive better outcomes, and our industry will be better and more profitable when we work together. So I'd just like to sum up, and I think that unity and bringing people together and letting people know of the opportunities that are out there. There have been many successful farmers out there in the dairy industry. It is one of the real success stories in agriculture, as how farmers have started with very little, like we have, and built our business up over the years. And it's only through working with industry bodies, through advocacy and R&D, that the industry can grow and farmers can achieve the goals that they have set. So in summing up, I would like to thanks for the opportunity, and also thank you for the UDV in facilitating today. Thank you.
Thanks, Daryl. Appreciate that. Next, we've got Robert Brokenshire. Now, we don't have video of Robert, but Rob, you should be able to talk now.
Yes, good morning, Simon. Can you hear me?
We can, thank you very much.
I apologise to members for not having the video, but I'm probably doing you a favour because you don't have to look at my face. First and foremost, to all members, thank you very much for allowing me to talk to you as a candidate for the ADF directorship. It is a busy time for all of us, and I appreciate that you've taken time out of your day. Just by way of background, I've been a grassroots dairy farmer now for nearly 40 years, and I'm basically the farm labourer at home now, you might say, because my son, I've given him quite a lot of opportunity to help grow the business. I believe in bringing young people into the dairy industry, and I believe that the dairy industry is heading in a very exciting direction if we get the parameters and the structures right. By way of background, I'm a grassroots dairy farmer, but I also have had the privilege of being in the Parliament of South Australia for 22 years. During that time, I have been a minister, and I've therefore had to work with ministerial councils across borders throughout Australia, and including when I was Police Minister, New Zealand as well. I've served in both houses of Parliament and understand very much the importance of advocacy, of governance, of making sure that you put the interests of your members first and foremost, and also of teamwork. When you look at the dairy industry, we've been through very difficult times, but at the moment, if we get it right, I believe Australia is poised to see substantial, sustainable growth in dairy industry right across all states. I see the importance of having state organisations, and whilst I've never been involved in board membership of a state organisation, I've been a member of a state organisation now for nearly 40 years. There are different roles that an ADF board and individual directors must take on to the state roles, but that doesn't mean that we don't be supportive and integrated when help is needed in the state areas, but we have different pitches to focus on, state issues and national issues. In our own situation, just to give hopefully some confidence to all the dairy farmers and their families there today, after a detailed feasibility study, we have made a decision to expand our herd. The decision wasn't made lightly, but it was made because I feel confident of the Australian dairy industry. And I believe ADF, over a very long period of time, but particularly in the last several years, have made some real inroads and partnerships with our paddock to plate partners, including our consumers, which I'd like to come back to later on. And I therefore believe now, if we're prepared to go from paradigm to paradigm proactively, if we're prepared to grab the challenges and manage those challenges, and I'm talking about things like climate change and dairy sustainability, I'm talking about geographical indicators and truth in labelling, I'm talking about industry unity. We also have the levy poll to face early in the new year. The dairy industry code reviews are there, and traceability, workforce and drought preparedness are some of the other key issues that we need to address. But they are not insurmountable issues. And if we manage them properly, I believe we can actually grow more the international image for Dairy Australia as being clean and green. If you look in the Netherlands at the moment as an example, the simplistic and, in my opinion, bad approach by their government says that they will reduce cow numbers. We have an opportunity to grow our cow numbers, to grow our dairy farmers, and to grow the industry, because if we accept the fact that to satisfy our consumers, be them national consumers or international consumers, then we have to be prepared to wear change for the better. It's not impossible for us to meet the 2030 commitments now being set up regarding greenhouse gases. It's actually possible for us to become carbon neutral and lead the way. If you see what the MLA have done with red meat, green facts, it's a good template that we can build on in dairy. To finish, I've been privileged to have a lot of roles so far. I'm not climbing a ladder, but I have the energy, the passion and the enthusiasm to help grow the Australian dairy industry. I want to put back into a dairy industry that over nearly 40 years has been good to my family and actually for generations before that, notwithstanding the challenges. I have strong experience, a lot of energy and a lot of passion. I believe in teamwork. I believe that we can do really well when it comes to better engagement as an ADF, but importantly, if we're to get the message through to government, set up the best possible opportunities for us to grow the industry with government, then we need people with experience and passion, and I want to put back into the industry. So I ask you as members to give me an opportunity to be a strong player in a new ADF board. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. Ben Bennett's next up. Ben. Ben, you're still muted. There you go. Good.
Okay, right. Well, thanks for the opportunity that UDV have given us to participate in this Zoom meeting, and the time the ADF members are putting aside to listen to us as the candidates. With the candidates, it's good to see the number that are standing and the calibre of them. Like they've just mentioned, I'm the newbie, and some of these people are very much the vanguard of the industry and the advocacy. And the amount of time they've put forward in doing this is commendable. So it's good to see that there is choice. Okay, it is with this aspect of choice, which is very important. Diversity, I see, is very key, both geographically and with farming systems, and the importance of farming and their former life experiences and skills that they can bring to the boardroom. Okay, and in this case, I'll just briefly go over my what I bring. Okay, coming from New Zealand, a long line of dairy lineage, basically from the time of settlement. But sadly, my father was the youngest of a family of 8, so my journey into the dairy industry and ownership wasn't going to be straightforward as some. So after university, I went, got a Bachelor of Technology in Biotechnology and Bioprocess Engineering. This was sold to young Kiwis at the time as advancing the value adding of the New Zealand dairy primary industries, particularly meat and dairy. And that's really all New Zealand's got, as we know. Most of the graduates went into the dairy industry. I went into the meat industry there, which is now over when I was there during the 90s and around the 90s, basically became the service industry for the dairy industry, particularly in New Zealand. In large part, that is the case here in Victoria. There is a large amount of dairy beef, and I think there's still a large opportunity there to be had. And in large part, that's the 13th month check, I suppose, for us dairy farmers. And it's quite good to see that being quite strong at the moment. So leaving that, I went into technical management in the meat industry, then into line management, then staff management, and then executive management. Okay, and in that time, there was a lot of changes to be done. There was virtually a restructuring of the New Zealand meat industry, effectively to become the service industry for dairy. Okay, and you used to be on the sheep's back, and then went into dairy. Then moved to the southwest, raised a family of 5. As you can see in the online farming online profile, where we experience is drought, fire, stressed out bank managers, expansions and retractions, no different to anybody else. Okay, to farming advocacy, even though I'm only just the regional branch president, I can see the frustration of all farm advocacy, not only locally, but from state to state. Okay, and the primary reason for this is the lack of money. People are there, and we can see from the candidates and the long serving that are there. Okay, it's not an issue of shortage of people, it's money. Okay, presently R&D has approximately $55 million a year. Our advocacy across all the states, ADF combined, is hardly, at coalface delivery, between 5 and 10% of that. We need to address this. Okay, our the dairy plan, etc., indicated that DA has got the capacity to facilitate development of policy. Okay, and it's policy which is very important for strong advocacy. Right, so with that advocacy, I see more of our issues on a day-to-day basis. I've put out myself as a sort of more of a grassroots person. I'm not going to solve world peace. I'm not going to save climate change. But 5 o'clock in the morning, all I want is my motorbike to start. At the moment, the regulations are no more import of bikes. So at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I've been around knocking on a fair few doors, I don't know anybody that's thinking of saving the world or anything. They just want their bike to start. I have 2 bikes because if the first one doesn't start, the next one better start. Otherwise, there's going to be a bit of a trouble for the rest of the day. So along with other day-to-day issues that I see as more critical, because without them, we won't have an industry. And that's things like the cost of fertiliser, overseas dependence on agricultural chemicals, even down to diesel, electricity supply, the stability of the grid. Virtually everybody's now having to go to their own generators. We're supposed to be living in the first world. So I suppose, yeah, my message is more of a grassroots thing of the day-to-day issues, which I think if we don't address some of these, we won't have to worry about the long-term stuff. But saying on the long-term stuff, I do feel there are huge opportunities. We moved here as immigrants, so we did see the West Island as a huge place of opportunity. I still maintain there is a huge amount of opportunity, but we have to get focused on some of the day-to-day issues, and I think they will sort out some of the bigger issues on to come. The ADF, I think, is absolutely crucial in this, but we need strong state bodies, but it is the ADF that determine the money of DA and oversee that money. And I think we need to give some encouragement to DA to help facilitate that money being put back into the RDPs, and the RDPs having more ownership from the members themselves, and develop issues that the members themselves in their respective states and regions find as their points of interest, as opposed to necessarily individuals trying their own perspectives. So that's my little rant. Thanks.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate that. And lastly, we have Heath Cook. Over to you, Heath.
Okay, thank you very much. Dear fellow dairy farmers, I am seeking your support for a position on the ADF board. I understand that most of you don't know me, and it's extremely difficult to make a judgment call based on this small bit of information you're about to receive. Are our core values and moral compass aligned? Do we share the same passion for dairy farming and the vision for our industry? My name is Heath Cook. I'm 49 years old, and it's taken me 30 years to gather the skills and knowledge necessary to be worthy of your vote for a position on our ADF board. At 14, I left school and worked in a bull catching team in the late 80s, contract mustering for clean skin buffalo and wild cattle in the Northern Territory. At 17, I realised that I required year 11 and 12 education to open myself to more opportunities. So I laid a map of Australia across the bonnet of my bull catcher and said to myself, if I could go and finish my schooling anywhere, where would I go? The next week, I sold my bull catcher, resigned, got a cash check for 13 months worked, rolled my swag and hitchhiked to the Sunshine Coast, rented a flat and enrolled myself in high school. Why is this relevant? Sometimes to go from A to B, you have to go via Z. Determined to one day to own my own dairy farm after completion of high school, I entered the mining industry back in the Northern Territory. For the next 20 years, I worked in every godforsaken mining camp, both in Australia and offshore, but never forgot while I was there. I saved every cent I possibly could over those 2 decades, and during that time on holidays, I'd explored the dairying regions of Australia, from the Atherton Tablelands to Gippsland. After several years of searching, I found the area that ticked all of my boxes, and I settled on a small dairy farm outside of a town called Dorrigo in New South Wales. In the last 15 years, our herd has grown from 80 cows to 400 cows, and our farm has grown from 300 acres to 700 acres. It has taken me over a decade to sustainably grow our business to a point where we now have 3 full-time employees and several casuals. It is important to me that you all understand why I'm nominating for this ADF board position. I'm not ego-driven, nor am I power-hungry. I want the same thing that you all want, a profitable, sustainable dairy industry, so that our children, if they choose to, can work beside us. But what do I bring to the table? Since entering the dairy industry 15 years ago, I've been relentless in furthering my understanding, representation, and education of our incredible industry. I'm currently serving my third term on the New South Wales Farmers Dairy Committee, and I currently reside on the Norco Cooperative Board. As I said earlier, prior to dairying, I was in the mining industry. And for the last 6 years of that career, I was the process superintendent of Australia's largest production gold mine, accountable for multi-million-dollar budgets and projects. In this capacity, I have sat on numerous boards and committees. This has given me critical insight to good governance, and I fully understand the importance of getting things right the first time and the ramifications of getting them wrong. In that role, I have vast experience in negotiating with international and domestic companies to achieve set targets. Whilst in the mining game, I completed a Bachelor of Engineering with honours in Chemical Engineering. I have diplomas in Frontline Management, Process Engineering and Metallurgical Engineering. However, time management is critical when committing to a board, and I want to assure you that I'm able to meet all commitments and that I'm prepared to do what is necessary to see our industry succeed. I fully understand that we as dairy farmers are under a huge amount of pressure, both financial, with social license to operate issues, and also environmental issues now being brought to the table. Please allow me to utilise the skills, knowledge and passion that I've acquired over the past 30 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Heath. Okay, everyone, as I said at the start, we will now take questions. To ask questions on the bottom of your screen, you can click on the raise hand icon, or you can type them into the Q&A function. So whilst you're thinking, I'll go to the Q&A function, and the first question in that is a question for John from Matthew Trace. It reads, reading your article recently on your ADF candidacy, can you explain why a static or declining milk pool should be accepted by ADF, and how will that be good for dairy farmers? John?
Yeah, thanks, Matt, for the question. To be honest, I'm not convinced that it's good for dairy farmers, but I think it's actually the harsh reality. I think there's going to be growth in the dairy industry, but it's going to be with individual businesses. I think the reality is that there will be less dairy farmers as we go forward. That's just going to happen with natural attrition as people get older and generational change happens on some occasions and not others. I think during the dairy plan with the regional consultations, there was a pretty good feel for where the opportunity for growth was in the Australian dairy industry. And there's some regions where there is opportunity, there are other regions where there is less so. And I always go back to what happened in Northern Victoria, that climatic conditions changed what happened in Northern Victoria. Most of the milk that we lost was as a result of those climatic changes and a much more competitive water market for less water. And water is the key issue here, I suppose, because we're reliant on it as an industry. And I think any future growth, there's still going to be significant growth in Tasmania because there's still significant opportunity there. There's still opportunity for growth in South Australia and probably Western Victoria. For a whole range of reasons, in other areas, it's going to be much less limited and less impactful. Having said that, I still think there's plenty of opportunity for individual businesses, but there will be less of them. And I think in terms of trying to get from 9 billion litres to 10 or 11 or whatever that aspiration might be, doing that in a sustainable way and a profitable way will be a significant challenge for a lot of areas, I suppose. Hope that answered the question, Matt.
Thank you, John. We have a question here from an anonymous attendee. It's addressed to those people who have been on the ADF board or are currently sitting on the ADF board. And the question is, what lessons have you learned in relation to the Australian Dairy Plan rollout? So has anyone currently or previously been on the ADF board that would like to answer that?
Yeah, I'm happy to deal with that. I think, Simon, given that's probably in my ballpark, given my history. So I think ADP rollout, I guess the one thing that there was 5 commitments that were agreed to, and 4 of those are actually being rolled out. I was somewhat disappointed in the way things landed with commitment 1. I think there was a significant opportunity there that we may have missed. But I also think during the process of that, it's taught us how we need to work more closely together, even though we can't have one organisation, which is what Grassroots farmers clearly said they wanted. That was unfortunately not able to be achieved. I think that it's given us a blueprint for what we need to do for ADF and DA and the RDPs and the state dairy farming organisations, is that we do need to be able to work much more cohesively to be able to achieve the same outcomes, even though we are in different organisations. So I think, yes, there's some disappointments in how that's been rolled out, but I also think that there's some positives. And to be honest, 4 of the 5 commitments are well on the way to being worked on at the moment.
Thanks, John. Another question from Matthew, and this is for you, Daryl. Reads, is your passion for the issue of climate change going to be a problem for you to manage as an ADF director, where an industry and board position will need to be publicly delivered in a disciplined and consistent manner? You're muted, Daryl.
We'll
Thanks.
go off mute. Thank you, and thanks, Matthew. I don't see it will be a problem at all. And as with all boards, good governance would say that the CEO would speak on behalf of the organisation and the chair would speak on behalf of the board. That's how the process should work. So on an issue like climate change, we already have an industry policy. Our policies we have already agreed to with NFF and have a whole of agricultural policy. So it would be up to the chair or the CEO to be the spokesperson to promote or advocate the industry position.
Thank you, Daryl. We have another question from Mr. or Mrs. Anonymous to all of you nominees. But how do you feel about the perception of a closed shop mentality which is perceived to be prevalent within the ADF board and the National Council? Anyone wish to respond to that question?
Yep, Simon. It's probably a little bit hard to respond to that question, given that it's a perceived vision, maybe that the ADF board and National Council are a closed shop. And I don't share that vision. Obviously, there are confidential issues sitting on a board, and matters are discussed are for the boardroom only, but particularly on National Council. And I think farmers need to view National Council as the representative part of ADF. That's the part where all dairying areas are represented at ADF, and that is why we work the way we do through the state farming organisations through to National Council, and there's a pathway there for all farmers to participate via their state farming organisation and to National Council to bring forward ideas, new developments, policy that can be debated. It is not a closed shop. It's definitely open for all farmers through the way that ADF is set up.
Simon, I'd be happy to answer as well if you like.
Thank you.
Look, I come as a clean skin, but I come with a background of realising that your membership or your constituency must be first and foremost in all the decision making and the teamwork around that board, that parliament, political party, whatever it is. Therefore, openness and transparency, as much as is possible within the governance laws, needs to occur. And I would be advocating a better communication. I'm not saying that the communication hasn't been reasonably good. I think Terry Richardson's done a great job, but I think we can still do better with our communication, and as much as possible, integration and consultation and transparency with the members would be what I'd be putting forward as a board member. If we are united and strong in our focus to grow the opportunities for all of us in the dairy industry, and accept the fact that we're there to do a job for the membership and we can demonstrate that, then we can build confidence with ADF. And I think the structure with ADF and the council is good, but possibly with some dairy farmers, they're lacking a little confidence, and we would need to improve that situation. And I would be committed to bring my experience to ensure that the board had that opportunity to improve our relationship. You can always improve your relationship with your membership.
Thank you, Robert. Heath.
I think it's an excellent question. It's highly pertinent to where we sit. And this comes down to some of the issues that I've already raised and underpins the issue why I'm putting my hand up for a position on the ADF board. Is it a closed shop? Sure appears that way to me, guys. We've got less than 10% of farmers, total national farmers, as ADF members. So we're only getting ideology and feedback from 9.3% of our farming industry. There's no cohesion there. We need to go out and we need to reconnect with our farmers. We need to be asking ourselves the hard questions. Why do we have such low farmer engagement at the top end of town? That's critical. We need to be looking in the mirror and asking ourselves the questions that we don't really want to ask. So I think we have a fundamental issue here. We don't have involvement. We have poor communication and we don't have cohesion. And that is what I would like to rectify. Thank you.
Thanks, Heath. Any other panelists like to respond to that question? John, was that your hand up?
Yeah. Thanks, Simon. I think certainly understand that the issue and I guess the perception. I think even to Heath's point that there's only 460 or 70 members nationally, keeping in mind the National Council is all the state dairy farming organisations, so they all bring the views of the states to ADF, and I think voluntary organisations struggle. I was part of an advocacy review which was only Victoria based a few years ago, and we actually did some desktop studies around advocacy worldwide, and this is not just a Victorian or a South Australian or an Australian problem, it's actually a global problem. Voluntary organisations really do struggle with getting people to be involved. I think in terms of the closed shop, I think we struggle to get people involved in the PAGs or the appropriate people involved in the PAGs at times. There's a lot of opportunity for people to be involved, but they choose not to be for a whole range of reasons. And I think, I think it is imperative of us to try and get that membership up and get participation up, because it is really challenging when you're making decisions on behalf of people that struggle to give you the input that you need to be able to make good decisions and make sure that you're as representative as you can. But I think to Colin's point, it is perception. I think there's more than anything, and it's certainly not the intent of those who are in those positions to be a closed shop in any way, shape or form.
Thank you. Ben, you got your hand up.
Yep. Yeah, I think the perception is very much real, but necessarily throwing the rocks at ADF might not be quite the right place for them to land. I think it's more to deal with the interface between the states, okay? The information is not coming back of the transparency of the National Council and who they are answerable to, i.e. back down to the branch level or the state issue, and we just don't see that kind of information. And I think the Policy Council should have more of a framework of where agenda items come to it and what the feedback actually is and what has actually been achieved. Because down at, say, my level, down here at the state branch, we've got no idea. And they hide behind virtually a veil of who knows. And the example is, dare I say it, is quad bikes. Like, this is a function that we have every single day. We've asked these questions to nothing. So if you want participation, talk in the language of grassroots farmers of issues of their day. If you want to turn grassroots farmers off, I'm sorry to tell you, some of you guys, talk about climate change. They do not want religious dogma. They just are practical people of today's issues. Thank you.
Daryl.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I concur with what Colin has said. Like, I think it is perhaps a perception. And I think when we go back to when the new structure of ADF was set up now, back 8 or 9 years ago, each state was able to contest a competitive pot of money, and that money was to actually go out and sign up members. And I think that by and large, for the first fair few years, it was the state's responsibility. ADF doesn't have a state membership list. It's the states that need to get out and sign up the members to become ADF members. That's how the structure and the system has been set up. So I think that, yes, we can all do better. I think we all need to step back and look in the mirror, as he said, and do better. But I think we need to understand what the process is and some of the responsibilities. And I think it's only in the last few years that a couple of states have gone out and actively sought those members, but there's still a lot of room for improvement from the other states to build that membership base. And if the states, and I can remember times in the past when the CEO of ADF met with all the policy managers of the states, and they shared the information, and the information got filtered back down through the states back to the members. So that is the conduit of getting information through to the members.
Thanks, Daryl. Colin, you've got your hand up. Just unmute yourself, Colin.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I've noticed I've been asked to answer question 1 as well as to the what did we learn from the rollout of Australian Dairy Plan, and I would imagine they are referring to commitment 1 of that plan in particular. And look, the thing that I've learned, I think many of us have learned, is about communication, and I readily admit that the communication has not been adequate on the rollout of or the work that's been done on communication on that issue. But I guess I suppose in defence maybe is that commitment 1 turned out to be far more difficult than anybody ever imagined. And in fact, you know, I don't think there was a stone left unturned that the panel didn't investigate to allow a commitment 1 to happen. It's very easy to deliver good news to farmers and progress, but when there's no progress, when it's stalled, it's not quite so easy to deliver that news. But I do think that it would have been better had the bad news been delivered, and had it been properly explained. I think farmers would have understood the reasons why commitment 1 has not proceeded with better communication. Thanks.
Thank you. I see we've got a few questions about how ADF can better engage with the grassroots membership, which is something that Ben touched on. And I think Daryl and Colin, you may have also. Does anyone else wish to make some comments about how ADF can better engage with the farmers? John?
Yeah, look, I think there's opportunity there, Simon, and I think Daryl alluded to earlier that in the past ADF has relied on its state dairy farmer organisations to relay those communications, and I think there has been times when that's been a bit of a challenge, and I think there's certainly room for ADF to communicate directly with its members, I think, on a more regular basis and with more of the information that is pertinent. That has happened at times in the past, and I think, you know, that has probably been something that's been a bit more of a challenge going forward, and I think we need to work through what is the best way for that to happen, and how is that best to get to as many people as possible, because as been alluded to, we don't have all the dairy farmers in Australia as members, so we don't actually have access to as many farmers as we'd like, and that challenge is something we need to try and overcome.
Thanks. Robert, you had your hand up? No?
Heath's got his hand up.
But Heath, ready, Heath?
Yep, thank you. Okay, how do we interact? Well, look, getting back to what I've already spoken about, grassroots farmers, are their ideas and are their concerns getting to the table? That's what we're really discussing here, representing our industry. Now, as already stated, less than 10% are actively now members. That gives me all the information I need to know. It means that grassroots farmers are disillusioned, and therefore they're not being taken, their questions, their concerns are not being addressed at a national level. Whether the state bodies have been found wanting, that's something that needs to be questioned, because they're driving the membership. If our membership's down, we need to go back and look at the state bodies. One thing I think we've all learned, though, going through COVID, is that have a look right now, you've got, and I think I speak for all of us, we're all very able now to do all different media platforms. We're doing them today, whether it be Zoom, GoToMeetings or team meetings. I think we need to start looking at technology and using that as an engagement tool. I understand there is nothing better than a face-to-face, but if we want to have reliable information and gathering that data, so a closed loop circle, information out, information back, and address the real concerns of our grassroots farmers, I think we need to start looking at additional and modern concepts of gathering that data, because obviously what we've done historically is not working. Thank you.
Thanks, Heath. Heath, while we've got you on there, there was a question addressed to you about why you left LPAC. If you'd like to comment on that, please.
Not a problem, Simon. I didn't leave LPAC. I resigned from LPAC. And the reason why I resigned is because I accepted the LPAC position to be a farmer representative. And whilst on LPAC, I believe that the terms of reference weren't being adhered to, and my ability to represent the farmers was removed. Now, when you're on a committee or a board, if you feel as though you're traveling outside of the terms of reference or the tour and you're not adhering to the reason that you applied and accepted the position in the first place, there comes a time when you need to step back because you don't believe that it's going down the correct path. And I don't believe farmers being listened to. I think that they are ignoring it because what was being brought to the table didn't match the rhetoric. And so I resigned. Absolutely. Because I was there for the farmer. I wasn't there for the top end of town. I was there to take what I'd heard at Grassroots after speaking to over 200 farmers, correlating that data and presenting that data. That was how I believe that I was tasked. That was a job I believe I was tasked to perform. When that information wasn't warranted or didn't get its didn't get as much substance or elevated to a degree where I thought it should have been, I left. Absolutely. And I'll do it again because I'm there to support coalface farming.
Thanks, Heath. Robert, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Simon. I just wanted to say to the members that, frankly, my experience is that you can never do enough to communicate with your membership. So you always have to be looking at new ways and innovative ways of how you can actually be available to hear what the issues and concerns are. Possibly we're going to have membership across several states. So it's with agreement of the board, we should be out there at the forums in the regions with the dairy farmers. We should also be available via mobile, so that if people want to ring us at night and have a chat to us about their concerns, we're available. It's all about servicing your membership. I'm a stickler for that, and I believe that we can always do better at that, but you must have a close look at how you improve and sustain your communication. If you do that, you can improve your whole organisation and the outcomes.
Thanks, Robert. Look, just following on from that, we have a question for Robert Campbell in the chat, and it's principally around how national councils, those elected councils, are made to turn up to meetings in their area. In other words, how they are forced to do the consultation with the grassroots members. Would anyone like to comment on that? All right, while you're thinking about that, I'll take a slightly different tack. We have a question from Anne Gardner, and it's about how would you deal with if your opinion is different to that of the board? Would you take your bat and ball and go home? Or how would you communicate that to members?
Yeah,
Colin.
yeah. Thanks. Happy to answer that. And yeah, the simple answer is definitely not. You know, we all come to the board comes together and we discuss. We we look at all the information that we have available to us, and maybe not all the board decisions are unanimous, but I feel we need to respect the majority and the process that we have in the boardroom, and my experience is that is certainly how it works. There are issues that may be against what the things that we might personally feel, but we need to remember that we are there in the best interests of Australian dairy farmers, and it's our duty to apply good tactics and good decision making for Australian dairy farmers.
Anyone else like to make a comment?
Yes, Simon.
Yes.
I'd like to say that in a democracy, and a board is a democracy, that unfettered, without favour or fear, input is paramount. But I would never take my bat and ball home, because that's not what being a good advocate and a good board member is about. You do your homework, you do your research, you put a strong case forward, you have good democratic debate, but at the end of the day, the majority must rule. And if the board makes a decision, a majority decision, I would support it, even though I would have potentially argued for amendment, change, or disagreed with it. You have to be part of a strong, united team to get results.
John?
Yeah, just endorse the comments that Robert and Colin have made. Like, I've been involved in a number of decisions that, you know, haven't been certainly to my way of thinking, but the majority, I wasn't able to convince the majority that my thinking was a better solution. So it is about, you know, consensus always rules, and I think you've got to be able to be flexible enough that you can see that's the way this democratic process has to work. Taking a bat and ball never really works in these sort of situations, because that just harbours discontent, I think. So, and to be honest, a lot of the decisions, like, you can have a strong viewpoint that that's not quite the way you were thinking, but that doesn't mean that the decision's been made is wrong. It just might be different. And at the end of the day, quite often, you know, having more heads contribute to a discussion and a decision usually gives you a better result than a single. So I think, yeah, taking your bat and balls, just that shouldn't happen.
Thanks. Heath, you wanted to make a comment.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Look, I just wanted to ensure that a difference of opinion is absolutely fine on a board. There's nothing wrong with that. If you have a look at traditionally, boards are made up with diversity in mind. So yes, there will be a difference of opinions. Not adhering to the terms of reference or the rules that we are governed by is a totally different kettle of fish. I just wanted to make sure that people understand that. So yeah, look, I've been on several boards and many committees, and yes, what it really comes down to is, and as John was just saying, it doesn't necessarily mean that the outcome that's been reached is wrong. It's just a different thought process and a different understanding. What is really important is that even if you differ, if you have a difference of opinions, when you leave the room, you must support the decision that's been made. All the dirty laundry is done privately. When you step out into the public arena, you must all support one another and also support the idea and the concept that got up at the board table.
Thanks, Heath. Daryl, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, and I suppose my comments would basically be no different to everyone else that has already responded. That we all come into the room with a variety of skills and a different perception on many things. But once you get around the table and you put all the views on the table and the decisions being made, then as a board, you have to stick together and you go out with a united and single view.
Thanks, Daryl. Ben, did you want to make any comments on that question?
Yeah, I think if people are going to develop an issue or something like that, they should do a lot of homework before they start to formalise it. They should sort of get out there and do a bit of a pub test, discuss things a lot more broadly, and definitely invite criticism, invite dissent, because that's going to make your opinion and your point stronger. Okay, so when you do get to moving it from informal to formal, you're actually covering a lot of the basis to try and depower some kind of friction, okay? You don't want to have the friction. And then when it moves to the boardroom, okay, you should all be nearly, that consensus and principle should largely be there, okay? There's a lot of talk about having blood on the boardroom table and all this sort of nonsense. You know, we don't want any of that. All the stuff that needs to be done as homework well prior to it. And if it's going to be so controversial as to have things getting a little bit heated, then obviously the homework's not being done. I think a lot more homework and even a concept that, you know, they talk about sort of socialising the issue, okay? Get out there and make sure it's well-grounded, then present it in a more stronger case. But the best way to get a stronger case is in the informal commencement, find out where the dissent will be, okay? And don't poo-poo it, actually it will enhance your case, okay? So then when it gets around the table, all this issues that there could be spillover outside of the boardroom, that should be well and truly taken out of the equation. You've taken that heat out of it. Thanks.
Thanks, Ben. Now we've got a question here from Glenn Britnell, directed at you, John, about, you've said in the past every second dairy farmer should leave the industry. Is that still your belief? And where are the opportunities for the young farmers to enter the industry and help grow it?
So I guess I'd like to know when I actually said every second dairy farmer should leave the industry. I don't actually remember ever making a comment that was as irresponsible as that, but I'd really appreciate if you could show me where I've actually said that, Glenn, because I think the last 30 years I've actually been totally the opposite to that. We've actually had a number of managers on a personal note that have gone and bought their own farms. We have been very involved in getting people started in share farming, and I still believe that's the backbone of the dairy industry in Australia. It's the backbone of family farms and how that ownership model can continue to work. There hasn't been a new model developed that can do things better than the share farming. And myself personally have been involved in developing people, mentoring and all sorts of things over the whole journey. So I don't believe that's certainly something that you could hold me to, and I would really like you to prove to me where I said every second dairy farmer should leave the industry, because it's not my view. There will be dairy farmers that will leave the industry. I've said publicly that some of them will leave very wealthy people because that's a choice that they want to make, and they're entitled to those choices. And I think that the industry will prosper. It will just look different, and farms will be bigger. That's a fact of life.
Thanks, John. Look, I'm trying to get through all these questions coming through Q&A, but I do have a question. And it's related to proposed amendments to the ADF Constitution. In particular, I think it's called Resolution number 10, and it's around the definitions of business members and state members. So I might go through the whole panel on this and get your comments, please. So I might start with you, John. If you're able to comment on that, please.
Sorry, where was the question, Simon? I haven't actually got that.
The question is about the proposed constitutional change, the resolution number 10, about the definition of business member and estate member.
Yep.
I presume you're aware of this resolution?
Yeah.
So what comments you might have on that, please?
I'm not privy to why that was brought through, but my understanding is it's probably just to be really clear on the definition between the two. I think there's probably been some cloudy waters there in the past, and my assumption is, given that I wasn't part of the process to formulate it, that it's actually to provide some clarity around that. That's probably about all I could comment on, I think.
Thanks, Colin.
Thanks, Simon. And basically, John is right there, is that Resolution 10 is not about introducing a new law to the Constitution, or it's about making or improving the wording of an existing part of the Constitution and removing the ambiguity around who can be members of ADF, and it's just to clear up any confusion that there might be, and so the intent of the Constitution is very clear to everyone.
Oh, sorry, thanks, Colin. Heath?
Thanks, Simon. Look, I agree. It is about tightening up the words so it can't be interpreted another way. But look, really, our product is border fluid. I see tankers with Victorian milk going past my place on a daily basis. We're restricting ourselves to our membership being confined to borders. We should be cross-pollinating as much as we can. If we want unity, we talk about unity, but then we talk about, state borders. What? I don't get it, guys. If we want strength and we want one voice, we need unity, we need cross-pollination. Rip the borders down and support one another. We are all dairy farmers in the same business. We should be talking it up and supporting each other. Thank you.
Thanks, Heath. Robert?
Well, when it comes to the Constitution, for many, it's a pain in the backside to actually have to change the Constitution. But the reality is that both law changes and modern language and changes within an industry sector do demand that from time to time there are amendments for clarity in a Constitution. And I would assume that's all that this is. But having said that, if there are significant changes in the Constitution, then obviously that has to go through the processes, including membership and AGMs. But I'm not fearful of looking at constitutional changes if they're in the best interests of the Australian dairy farmers' membership.
Thank you. Ben, would you like to make a comment?
Yes, thanks. It is good to reflect on our Constitution. I must say, when I was doing the interview with the professional review, they asked me about the Constitution and I told them, well, you're actually not going to like my answer. The whole Constitution's a bit of a mess as I see it. It needs clarity. I think the opportunity to do a change, it could take on more factors. And one of the issues, as Robert has actually just said, it is a golden opportunity. We just simply lack members. We need more members. UDV sadly has been bled out, eviscerated and nearly decapitated as far as dairy professional fronting up. It's a very big worry. There could be some people who would like to become members of ADF, but they have to go through the state body. I accept UDV, VFF, the way it is, but sadly 2/3 of farmers don't. Thereby they're disenfranchised from belonging to ADF. Now, if we look across the border, I'm in the southwest of Victoria, we look at South Australia, it's SADA, I feel they've actually got a very good model, exceptional model. It actually costs very little to associate with them. They're generating their own funds, they're doing some very interesting things. We need to consider them. So some farmers may wish, you know, as opposed to getting onto a more of a fringe group, which we don't want to get into naming names necessarily, but I can understand how they break away. But we don't really want them to break away. We would like them to come into the fold. And I think having more choice, and I'm looking from a grassroots perspective, I make no apologies from that. I'm looking from the bottom up, not from the top down. I'm looking at it from a member's perspective, okay? And sadly, in the biggest dairy state, we haven't got that strength of membership. We need that strength. Thank you.
Thanks. And Daryl?
Yeah, I think that Colin probably summed it up in that this is about a tidy up because of some ambiguity in the Constitution, that just to provide more clarity. I think if we're going to go further than that, then we probably, it's going to look at wholesale constitutional change, which is going to take a lot longer and perhaps it's needed. We've been through it before, we might have to go through it again, but I think that it would be a bit disingenuous to have farmers not paying a levy to a state organisation being a member of another state organisation, but expecting their state where they live to actually be paying the subscription to ADF when they're not contributing to that membership of their state body. So I think the tidy up is needed.
Thanks, Daryl. Everyone, I've just been going through all the questions we've got in the Q&As again, and by far the dominant question is about the communication from the grassroots all the way through to ADF Council and how that operates and how councillors can be made, I think the words used are more accountable back to the grassroots farmers. It's a very common question throughout that whole lot. Most of you have answered it. Would anyone like to add any more comments in responding to that? John?
Yeah, look, it's certainly a significant challenge for the industry, I think, and I think I think Heath made a comment before about technology and how we can use that, and I think that's something that you know, COVID has probably almost taught us to deal with technology, whether we wanted to or not, and it's certainly accelerated, from my experience anyway, people's level of comfort with dealing with technology in this forum. I think there are ways we can do that. I guess there's also some risks as well, because I think when you're collating everybody's opinion, you've somehow got to come to a consensus. And I guess, and I'm not a big advocate for the old structures that we've had, but the old structures were built around that filtering process so that you had consensus delivered as you worked your way up. And I think because of the breakdown in that branch structure, I'll say, and I'm talking about Victoria largely, or certainly some branch structures, that getting that consensus at branch level and then at policy council and then at national council has been more challenging. There's no doubt about that. And I think we do need to find a way to enhance the ability that's there with technology to be able to get more input when we require it. I don't have a strong technical aptitude around technology. I'm sure there's people that do, and I think that's something that we've got to do better.
Thanks, Colin. You've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. Look, I think we all agree that communication is a key thing that we need to tackle going forward. But it's not as simple as it sounds, and I kind of feel that, you know, we've never had so much communication or ways of communicating. Communication is a two-way thing, and it's about listening as well as it was actually speaking. But we have a lot of I suppose, noise in the background, and we have social media, we have all sorts of things that are communicating. If you really want to know what ADF is doing, you need to listen to ADF.
Thank you. Anyone else like to add to that? Heath?
Yeah, look, and I am adding to that, Simon. Like, I agree with what Colin said. I think though we're missing a bit of the point here. We're saying, well, I hear a lot about what we're going to do, what we're going to do. Let's ask the farmers what they want. They will tell us how they want to communicate. We just need to listen. Let's do a survey. Let's get some solid data feedback. The answers are out there. We've just got to ask, correlate, and then provide an avenue and be a conduit. I don't believe it's that difficult. Now, it's easy saying that when you're outside the tent, but there are many, many industries that have far better communication than us. I just think we need to go back and let's ask the people that we want their involvement, how they want us to communicate, what suits them, what they'd prefer. I don't think it's that difficult, guys.
Thanks, Heath. Anyone else?
Yeah. Daryl here.
Daryl, yeah.
Yeah. I think when we're trying to formulate a national policy position and the structures that we have, is that the National Council are made up of all the states, whether it's the state presidents or the 3 Victorian regions. But the National Council actually bring forward the state view. That has either been through state conferences, was been through their policy council, or whatever the structure is that state operates under. So when the National Council are debating these views, they have already gone through a filtering process from their local farmers to come to a state view, and then it's the amalgamation of those state views that have to get then debated at a national council, and then has to go to ADF board to implement and assess how that fits within their strategic plan. So yes, there's 5,000 farmers out there with 5,000 views on things, but they all have to go through a process through their state bodies to come to the National Council.
Thanks, Daryl. No one else? So I've got a question here from Ian Morris for you, John, basically suggesting how do we know that one organisation is not possible? In other words, could there be multiple organisations involved? And he's referring to some comments that David Nations made to Senator Eston's committee about no legal advice sought for what they wanted to talk to the department about. Would you have any comments for that, John?
I'm certainly not aware of that commentary. My understanding from what I've been told is that the possibility of one organisation is not possible with the current legislation. If there's a different view to that, if you want to try and resurrect that, I think that might be a bit of a tough ask, but I'm certainly not aware of that and wasn't involved at the time when those decisions were made. So I don't know the detail that Ian perhaps knows.
Oops, sorry, I had to unmute myself. I've got to remember to do that. I think I'd know after 2 years, wouldn't you? Just going through all the questions. As a question to Daryl here from an anonymous attendee saying, can you explain how UDV Policy Council are able to articulate a view when the majority do nothing to engage with UDV Policy Council? Daryl, do you want to make a comment on that?
I'm no longer on the UDV Policy Council, so I'm not sure what directive or they've been told how they engage or what they can and can't say. But I think that as I said previously, the national councillors are there to take forward the state view that has been formulated through their state policy council structure.
Okay. And Daryl, I have another question for you from this anonymous attendee. It's relating to irrigated dairy. Do you still believe that your negative take on the future prospects for irrigated dairy in the north, as you left, are still valid?
I don't think it was a view of my negative views. I had a view that if I was to continue farming there, I would have to significantly change the way in which I farmed. We see numerous people moving down to a system that relies on far more machinery, perhaps sheds and barns, and that was not what I was comfortable in how I wanted to farm. So it was more a case of that was my skill set isn't in operating machinery. My skill set's in growing grass and feeding cows, and that's how I wanted to continue farming.
Thanks, Daryl. Look, everyone, I think I've gone through all the questions we covered. I think we've covered everything that's been raised, and by far the dominant one is that how elected representatives, which the positions you'll put your hand up for, are going to ensure they're finding out what the dairy farmer wants. And I think everyone's had a very big chance of responding to that. I think we've covered that a number of times. Does anyone want to make a closing comment before we call it quits? No? Okay, so any more? I can't see any more. Yes, Daryl. See your hand up.
Yeah, my closing comments, and it was one of the questions that was asked through the interview process, but I think some of the other people standing have also raised these issues, that this industry will continue to change. We have been through significant change in the last 20 years, and I think that we're going to go through just as much change again, perhaps in the next 10 years. And I think it's, I can see dairy farming numbers will continue to drop. That's just the way it's going to be. It's just not particular to dairy, that's in agriculture as well. So we need to think about what this industry is actually going to look like in 10 years' time. There will be more corporate agriculture and farming. I can see a significant amount of milk being sold on platforms rather than directly through processors. And these are all the challenges that as an industry we're going to have to face, and we're going to have to come up with the solutions and how, as an industry, we operate best in that environment.
Thanks. Phil Ryan's just reminded me that I might have missed one of his questions to everyone. I think, is it the one where, to John, we just described only 2 or 3 areas of growth for the dairy industry and suggested we should set the natural decline in other areas. Could you explain how this view fits with the leadership position in the national advocacy body?
Yeah, I guess my comments around that are largely out of what was discovered during the dairy plan. And I think if you are a young person looking to get started in the dairy industry, where would you go to look to establish a dairy business at this point in time? And I think there are places where you would do that are quite obvious. There are others that are absolutely going to be a lot more challenging. And I think it's about being realistic about where that is. I mean, you can't go and say, I'm going to farm in West Gippsland where we are. And this area is declining and it's going to continue to decline because of urban development and land price. That's just a fact of life. I mean, that's a good thing for those who are getting out. It's not the place for a young farmer to be starting because they can't afford to get in. I think there are other places in the country that are really challenged around water, etc. And I think that, you know, if you're going to move somewhere that relies on water and there's no water, that's not a great business decision. You need to be a little more mobile and actually think where you're going to have that 20-year future. And I think, you know, there's still going to be dairy farmers in all states of Australia in 20 years' time. I have no doubt about that. But I have no doubt there'll also be less of them. And it will be a challenge for, you know, I mean, there was a comment on the chat around 250 cow farms. 250 cow farms is still fine. I've got no drama with that. Like, I started when 200 was a large herd. Now it's not. That's just the harsh realities of it. And I think I'm not one that wants to play the victim, and I'm also not one that's going to sugarcoat something. I think we need to deal with realities as we move forward, and that's just the harsh realities of life. I mean, you know, at the end of the day, we all want to prosper, but we've got to make sure that we take responsibility for where we farm and how we do that. So I hope that's answered your question, Phil. I'm not trying to be controversial. It's just the facts of life.
Thanks, John. Ben, do you want to make any comments in closing?
I need to have more practice on doing Zoomies. But hey, look, thanks for the opportunity, guys. And obviously we see some well-seasoned people who can articulate their positions, and hopefully that services the opportunities for our members to have a selection. It's very important to have a selection, then we have choice. And that is clearly put on display today. And I think it's excellent that the candidates are all here present, having and putting it forward and taking on the questions. So excellent to everybody participating. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Ben. Heath, would you like to make a comment?
Thank you, Simon. First of all, I'd like to thank all the participants who, I know as a dairy farmer myself, there are many other tasks that you could be doing that are more pertinent than listening to me today. So first of all, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. Second thing, if you have a pen and paper ready, my phone number is 0477 047 960. My name is Heath Cook. Got dramas, want to slap me around the head, give me a call, pick up the phone, please. I'm here to represent all dairy farmers, no matter what state you are in. Thank you.
Thanks, Heath. Robert.
Thank you, Simon. Firstly, again, thanks to all the dairy farmers that have been on Zoom today. I just reiterate a couple of quick things. Firstly, whilst there are always challenges, we are facing, I believe, unprecedented opportunities in dairy Australia to grow the industry. And ADF is going to have an integral part in that when it comes to advocacy and governance and ensuring that your voices are heard in the right parts of the national government. I've got the experience to be able I've got the experience to be able to bring that to the table. I've got the energy, and I ask for the opportunity so that I can be a strong contributor in ADF to the future of the dairy industry. So thank you very much. And I look forward to the next few weeks and see what happens. But certainly there's some good candidates there, and I thank those candidates for their efforts also.
Thank you, Robert. And I think Colin.
Thanks, Simon. And yeah, too, I'd like to thank VFF and UDD for facilitating this event, and also to the farmers that have logged in and for the questions that they've asked. I don't think we've addressed all the questions that have been asked, but I've noted them down, and I'm sure we'll get a copy of them. And should I be found on the new board in due course, then I'll certainly do what I can to ensure that these questions are listened to and answered the best way we can. Thank you.
Thanks, Colin. Look, thank you, everyone. From my point of view, I think there's one big takeaway out of this, and that's communication. I think that's been very clear. May I wish all the candidates all the best in the coming election. And thank you very much, everyone, and also for the ADF members, the 20-odd, 30-odd, I think we hit at one stage, who attended today. And no, timing's not the best, but it never is the best, no matter when you do. But thank you, everyone, and good luck in the election. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.